last 2 years. They believe that there is some event which is so unusual that has happened, that some situations have changed, and all that you really need to do is to duck yourself, to not do anything very strategic, to not do anything very unusual, but try and keep your cost to the lowest possible situation and wait for some times to change. Suddenly the promises will get fructified. The unfortunate reality is that this is the nature of business that's going to be remaining with us, and we will have to find strategic solutions on how are we going to thrive and continue to create value in this kind of an uncertain situation, because this uncertain situation is actually an opportunity for you to rethink your model and try and see how you're going to continue to make your value more and more. In fact, it's very funny also the fact that we say as if it is a choice for the business manager to not consider people management, or the people manager to not be able to clearly understand what is business management. We try to position the entire hypothesis as a matter of choice for a business manager to have an option to say, I can design and run an organization without a people management strategy, and the people manager to believe that he can actually run his own function without having a clear alignment with with the business management challenges. And what the changing situation is actually doing, Suresh, is that it has collapsed this relationship and brought it very close to first say that the business manager has to be first an effective people manager, and the people manager has to align himself to understand what business management is all about. And that's the greatest challenge.
Very well. Good close, Adil. Munish, Monish, I will look to you for your experience on both industry and consulting.
Okay.
So you got a wide range to draw on.
No, thanks, Suresh. Good evening, everyone. And thanks for starting off. It's something very close to my heart, and I want to narrate actually an example of something I found very close home, actually in Gurgaon, in a small restaurant chain. An owner was a friend of mine. Something that I haven't seen in any organization after that, or even before that. So the scenario is, in a restaurant, as you can imagine, they get free time after lunch, after they serve lunch, and before they serve dinner. So between 3 to 5 o'clock or so. And this particular restaurant had a practice of reviewing what they did in the previous dinner and the lunch, about things that went well, things that they could improve, what should they work on, etc. The fascinating thing was, in this setup, right from the head of the restaurant, to everyone was involved, including the servers and so on. So if you are if you know that scenario, the folks who were managing it were probably 1/3 as educated as the folks sitting in this room. Most of the servers had probably cleared class 5 or class 10 maybe, but nothing more than that. Almost nobody could speak English properly. But there was something very fascinating about that. They were sitting in front of a whiteboard, and one of the members there was running this meeting, not the head of the restaurant. And he was saying, and if I can say in Hindi, he said, "Acha, kal kya mistake ho? What mistakes did you make yesterday?" So said, "Mistake number 1, okay, I actually got the order wrong. Actually, the customer wanted this." So then the question was, who did this? And this was the turning point. Everybody would say, I did it. And it went on like that, from one mistake to the other, and they would write it down, write the names of the people who were involved who made a mistake, and at the end of it they would clap, saying, "Fantastic, we found 5 mistakes or 7 mistakes or whatever." And then they would spend time to actually go out and make sure that these mistakes are corrected, right? And they would do this again and again and again. And what I heard, I worked with them over a period of time, what I heard was they never made the same mistake twice. Never made the same mistake twice. And that got me thinking about, so really, what did these guys do better than anybody else? Well, what they did finally, or really different from anyone else, is what they created an organization where people took charge of how to run the business closer to the customer, right? Now, how did that happen? And if you think about it, I want to take it to a question, and we'll talk about some of the mechanism, but I want to take to the question of what really is the role of a business, to do this, and particularly from an HR point of view. My submission is the role of HR is no longer about, hiring those people in the room, training them, engaging them. I think you have done and dusted with that. You look at your top 5 companies in a sector, you name an industry. Okay, I can bet on you. You don't differentiate on strategy. Okay, you don't differentiate on the quality of talent that you have access to. Your reward systems, the policies, technologies are not very different. What differentiates in a broader sense is the culture, but I have a trouble with the word culture because it's very difficult, it's a very amorphous idea. But the specific aspect of culture which I find much more valuable is the ability to unlock discretionary effort of people. Discretionary effort, you understand, is an effort beyond the job description. It's not something that's written there. People are able to do beyond what's there. So how can organization tap into the discretionary effort of people so that they are able to do the right thing and figure it out themselves? This restaurant was able to survive in environments when the industry wasn't doing too well, or the spends weren't too much, as well as the growth periods, right? Why? Because those guys had their ears to the ground, they understood the customers, and they navigated their way through. So the point of the function, of the HR function, is create a capacity in the organization that it can, help the organization navigate the toughs and, the terrain that the organization would take. And in order to make that...
Manish, later, hold this. I want you to come back with examples of how this has been done.
Oh, I will
simple and clear. Okay?
I will talk about it.
Because what I also hear you talk about, and connect back to something not in so many words by Shiv Kumar, and what I heard last week elsewhere in Delhi, is the difference between policy and culture. Culture being what you really experience every day on the ground. Okay, everything else is English and policy. So I'd want you to come back to that. I also want to manage time.
Oh, sure.
Okay?
No, please.
But please come back with examples because I know you have them. Rajendra, want to take a shot?
No, I think can't agree more with the fellow panelist. Only I think relevant to today's topic, and I go back to Steve's statement in terms of the cockpit analogy that he had, correct? The CEO, the CFO, and the navigator. But I think of late, if you look at, I've turned back 30 years, manufacturing, other industries, and of course then to BFSI. It's also contextualized. But I think at a macro level, if you ask me, we don't anymore, at least, I propagate that, we don't anymore call HR function as function, correct? It's a human resource management, right? Start right from the CEO, and as Shiv Kumar rightly pointed out. Again, everybody is giving examples. So, one little example that I actually recollect from Domino's, correct? The pizza company. So, if you go to any of the Domino's shops, in the morning before they open up, one of the, very simple HR process that they have, which is actually a business process. And why I'm saying it's a business process and HR process together, because if you ask some of the managers of Domino's or maybe other pizza companies or other, such industry, if you can't have that process done correctly early in the morning, which is called a huddle of those delivery boys, they can't grow their business.
Rajendra, you just have to move this up a bit. Just move the mic up.
Am I not audible?
No, just have to move this up a bit.
Am I audible? Okay. So I was talking about this example. So look at, one can call it as an HR process or the people process. But actually, it is a business process for Domino's, because if that huddle doesn't take place in the morning, the whole day's business probably will be defective, so to say. Correct? So it's a question of, what do you say? So I was talking while talking about this topic. The strategic plans are being discussed at the, let's say, executive council, where the HR person is sitting there as well. And in the hookah world, as my friend said, so you have things coming in as it changes every now and then. In fact, almost every week, if not a little faster. And while the strategy is being planned for those changes, how to actually mitigate those risks out of the changes, the HR person sitting there simultaneously thinks that what people's strategies that I should actually then adopt for this kind of issue, which will probably be tackled tomorrow. Now, then you start thinking, as he was saying, that immediately you start thinking in terms of how you actually manage them, and then convert them into, so to say, the HR processes. We take little, let's say, a simpler approach, saying that you don't want to reinvent the things, altogether new, for every new thing that you actually come up with in the strategy room. But you look at what is there in the repository. And that's how, people then get into the potential review, the talent inventory, then they want to actually, review them, probably look at the intervention that you want to actually, bring in. Then you actually get into the HR, so to say, HR jargons. But it starts from the strategy table. It starts from the HR leaders thinking that how do I then actually bring in my thinking in terms of the HR strategy for this issue of a business today. You can't actually, be in the glory of the past, correct? And that is how I believe that HR, you can't live without in terms of the human resource. I'm not talking about the human resource function per se. Human resource being part of the strategic conglomerate at the board level. That's my view.
Yes. Ajay, would love to hear your perspective on how you've seen organizations, and especially the HR organizations, build the business up. And you have considerable experience across HR, manufacturing, and I don't know which other functions, and you've seen a range of industries.
Let me start with first the way I heard Adil at a very macro level, what should happen and what shouldn't happen at a VUCA level and how we should create it. And when I come back to Munish taking an example of what is being done in a restaurant, and Rajender beautifully covered it up by saying it's all performance. And my memory slightly stretches back to the title topic which the organizers defined was HR for business growth. So now keeping relevant to the topic, what I would like to see that perhaps is HR for the business growth, and what should HR be looked at or what should HR be doing if we have to grow the business. And if I take this context of this topic, then I will divide my talk in two parts. A, to share at a macro level my view. If today I have to articulate that what is HR in the organization, and secondly, if that's the definition of role of HR, how my 3+ decades in different stages of growth we could do it. I have arrived at a conclusion that HR is nothing but connecting competence to create culture across the organization, which talks whichever environment you are. And once you're connecting culture of competence, there is nothing which is left beyond to be done. You can connect culture of competence when your basics, when your augmented roles, and when your packaging roles are in place. In other words, what I'm saying that HR should no more be looked at a segmented role, which was 3 decades ago sometime personal, 2 decades ago sometime training and development, 1 decade ago sometimes sourcing and compensation, because if you look at it, moment the sunrise industry came up, the HR was nothing but sourcing. How many people you can hire tomorrow? And we all have built ourselves on one or the other segment of the competency. Thanks to the industry, shortage of people. So in those verticals we have grown, and ultimately we have taken up the larger roles, being specialist in one specific role, missing the generalist acquirement. To my mind, HR should be practiced in the companies purely like a product. Any product has a core of it has its augmented role, and it has a packaging role. Fortunately or unfortunately, HR also in the organizations keep getting perceived purely from the packaging angle. And nowadays, much more when we talk about employee engagement. Okay, this all is connected with the business growth. That's where I'll connect a little later. When we talk about employee engagement, it's much deeper a subject. How you engage his intellectual, his emotion, his whole discrete efforts, which Munish mentioned, to connect to the organizational requirement, not the event management, which by and large 99% of us are doing.
Ajay, later, and I guarantee you I'll come back to you if you don't remember, is I think we would all love to hear examples of how in a large organization
Quickly,
you've had a way to engage the emotion and the intellect, and also and make it personalized, which is what you were building on what
Sure.
Monish was saying.
So let me divide the growth.
You want to do that now?
So
You want to give
on
an example now?
I can come back later on.
No, please do that now then.
Right now you want?
Yeah.
Let's look at it when we talk about HR and growth. HR's role, which focus it would come, will depend on what type of growth you are into.
Okay.
Okay? Growth of a business can come from a new business which is at a nascent stage, and you may say I am growing 1000% every year, but you may be growing from 1 rupee to 10 rupee. The growth of a business can come when you have reached a market status and now you want to take to the next level of the business, and there the focus would be different. And the growth also can come in the business when you have already plateaued and started declining and you want to take a next go. While the product as cap of HR will remain, your focus will keep shifting. In my career, I had an opportunity to set up new businesses where we had a main focus role, HR. If you look at it at that time, the core of HR, the 5 elements of HR which now we don't feel like much talking, they are important. How you build and design the organization structures, how you build your compensation structure, how you build that agile thing. And that's where the whole focus remains. How do you bring the people in who are agile and the relevant to competence?
Okay.
One of the things which I have seen and which we have consciously corrected. Yes, Suresh.
We'll come back to the example. To you spend most of your career in information technology, okay? Sunrise industry for years. And your organization particularly has seen stupendous growth over the years. You've been a part of that. And as a function also you've changed. We know that. What did you guys do there that built the organization and also changed the way HR worked that organization?
So in our, am I audible? Yeah. So in our business, I think, the role of management is very minimal. I think that's the way I will start. So if I describe my business, we are 95,000 people, 28 countries, offering 5 services to 500 customers. So if that is the business that we are in, and the way we offer services to our customers is there's a problem statement and a group of people come together to solve that problem. And there are 10,000 teams solving that problem. And no way on earth a top management team or CEO is able to will be able to add value in the trenches. So the main job of leadership, the way we have defined, is to add value to the interface between the employee and the customer. And that's the question we asked and said that the discretionary effort that Monish talked about, how do we make sure that people in the projects will be more customer aligned, will be more creative, will be more expert, and will go the extra mile to add value to the customer is what we said is the job of management, is the job of culture, is the job of the HR function, is the job of all the processes. To unlock this discretionary effort, we did a few things. We said that we can't, and Shiv Kumar very beautifully said that the organization is becoming more individual, right? We are not looking at clones. So how do we recognize that there are different kinds of individuals and they have different kinds of aspirations? And how to be really true to them in terms of giving them the tailwinds that they need, that's something that he beautifully spoke about. And that we said is a job of management. How did we do it? First of all, we made sure, for example, we have a program called EPIC, where we find out among the 15 drivers that people could have, what are your top 3 drivers? And once you find out what your top 3 drivers are, we then ask how many of those drivers you are using in your work today. And then we go back and say, as a manager and a leader, how can we make sure that each to his driver, how can we create autonomy, mastery, and meaning around that individual? A lot of what we do is around that, and that's how we redefine the role of management.
To be contrarian, this sounds idealistic.
Sure.
You got 95,000 people, most of them writing code.
Right.
Where's the autonomy in that? You pretty much put them 8 hours to the desk.
Right.
So where's it? How have you really recognized the discretionary effort and unlocked their potential, their warmth feeling for the company, and hence they're doing more efficient writing, faster?
Sure. So very good question. So I'll give you 2 metrics as to why I think and how I think it works. For example, at HCL, we have a social career management. So internal to HCL, like a Facebook and a LinkedIn, we have a platform, a social networking platform. So our career processes actually function on the social networking platform, which means that if I want to do something and I have more than one choice, I go to my network and ask, right, what is it that you think I should be doing? And what do you know about me? Can you advise me? And like your CISA app, people advise, 5 of my network members may think that I should be a technical architect. 10 of my network members may think, no, I should be a project manager. So we have tried to conceptualize a process where the individual is at the center of the career, and that's how it works. And it's a voluntary process. And out of 95,000 people, about 40,000 people engage in that network. And they daily ask opinions. And they don't go to their manager and say, help me grow to the next role. They can choose any person in the network and have a discussion with that person. And by choosing any person in the network and having that discussion, we recognize the people that people want to go to. Therefore, we recognize career counselors not by appointment, but by election. So when the individual select, so that's how in a very large, fast-moving organization, through a process which is hosted on a social network, we have managed to implement the ideal design of employees first into the system. Second thing that I will tell you is HCL is probably the largest in terms of the percentage of revenue that is coming from employees spotting opportunities who are non-sales people.
Brilliant.
So that's something that's a very strict process. So employees go to the customer, they understand what the customer is trying to do next, and then they log in an opportunity. The opportunity goes to the salesperson. The salesperson has to forego his bonus and say, look, I didn't spot this opportunity, the employee spotted. And that is the second biggest channel of revenue today. It will soon become the first biggest channel of revenue. Thirdly, almost 10% of our revenue we give back to customers through a mechanism called as the value framework, where employees daily generate ideas around their customer context, and then they tell the customer, this is the idea that I have, and together they calculate the value of the idea, and HCL doesn't charge its customer for that value. So there is a groundswell of innovation and employee centricity that we have been built through these value systems and programs, and that's how I see some of these intents which are hard to translate getting translated on the ground.
Thank you. Adil, this goes back to something you said. I think no better than you to share with the group solutions that you've seen implemented and which you've helped drive, which have helped organizations grow and stay together in fairly difficult times. And I know that you have seen in different industry sectors in your career, you have seen this.
I'll tell you some 4 or 5 things that I have seen as common practices which possibly earlier we used to do in multinational companies like GE and Coca-Cola, and then I see now these kind of practices being followed in the large Indian multinational companies, which I believe consolidate this entire journey of what we are talking about. Number 1 has been early identification of talent. Whenever organizations have had systems and processes to identify talent very early in their life cycles, those organizations have been very successful in doing the kind of alignment that we are talking about. After early identification, organizations, and particularly I refer to organizations like Coke and maybe Pepsi also, but I don't know much about Pepsi. I can't comment on Pepsi, right? So they have given early P&L responsibilities to the people. So the classical model is to put the P&L responsibility too late in the career onto the guy when he comes to a very senior level, versus most of the MNC practices are to put very early identified leaders into a P&L responsibility so that his business orientation, number orientation, result driving processes certainly go ahead. And of course, HR has to drive that process.
And if I dare say, his ability to manage multiple functions and intersections and people, and you've tested him early on.
And tested not through any assessment processes that we like to test them through the final test of P&L responsibility to drive the numbers. And that's very important. A third process I have seen, and everyone keeps talking about, and this whole employer branding concept where everyone says we do career management and we do rotation and things like that. But one of the most important things I have succeeded in observing in companies which really make a difference of becoming an HR partner, a business partner, is when they systematically have programs to do job rotations, where they take people from functions, and like a mechanical religion, your career goes through a series of rotations and you have to learn different jobs to grow. It's only then that the real business orientation comes in, doesn't come by theory. The fourth practice I have seen happening in most of the good organizations which do this alignment is mentoring and reverse mentoring. Mentoring, naturally, everyone knows about it, so I don't need to highlight on it. But reverse mentoring is, realize a world. Most of the decision makers in companies today are senior people who are digitally challenged. And the entire universe that is moving now for the future growth and business strategy is all going to be digital. So how do we make, till we transit from point A to point B, how do we make our senior guys who are going to be the decision makers and who are unfortunately digitally challenged, how through the process of reverse mentoring are we creating that readiness so that people are going to move up to that kind of a thing? And the last I have seen is, how do HR professionals succeed in influencing change in culture through systematic employee communications? And when this happens, and those communications are not general communications, business-based communications where employees can see a direct link between what they are doing and what the business is doing, so that they build it very strong.
Thank you. How many people from financial services? This is Bombay. Very few.
Very few.
Surprising. This
They're
commercial
all moving to Gurgaon these days.
Okay, here's the truth. There is like 1, 2, 3 of us from Delhi NCR on the stage. Okay,
But remember, you still have to come to Bombay.
that's true. All right, always. This is where the money is. Ajay and Rajendra, to both of you, the life insurance industry has only faced headwinds for the last 6 years, 5 years, will continue to face headwinds, regulatory and otherwise. And this is pretty much the same question I asked Adil, but specific to both your organizations in the industry you're in. How have you managed to hold the organization together and yet grow the business in a very difficult time? And you have very high attrition levels in your business. You deal with a fairly strong regulator. You have mis-selling as a problem, and you have a strong media. And this goes to the topic for today.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So I think good, but I think you asked, how many people are from the BFSI. I think very few hands, went up. But I had kind of a view saying that, while you have a contextual, kind of situation here in life insurance industry, which I'll definitely talk about. But if you analyze by and large the people issues, correct, of course in the particular context. For the participants' benefit, let me put some facts maybe in a minute. So let's say life insurance industry, I will talk about my company. So I'm from HDFC Life. We are 14,500 employees. We are one of the best places to work for consecutively for the last 5 years. Number 1 in the private insurance industry. I'm deliberately giving these facts to you, not boasting about my company. So that's the one positive talk about it. Let's say we have 24 partners or players in the industry. LIC is a big daddy with about